Well, I first saw Donnie when I was a high school coach back in the late 60s and early 70s, and Donnie was diving at Fort Lauderdale High. And then I came here in 1981 as an assistant to Randy Reese, and I knew Donnie was here until 81, and I would see him at meets and stuff. And then Donnie came back in 1989, I think it was, when we were looking for another diving coach. And then when I was the head coach, then Donnie and I worked together.
So I'm sure it's been a whirlwind of emotions for you now. This maybe you've had kind of 24 hours to deal with it. How are you coping with it right now?
Well, if you knew Donnie, the way he would want you, I think, to cope with it would be just to kind of keep going on. And he was one of the happiest guys to be around you ever met. You know, he was one of these guys that didn't matter what time of day or night, and had a smile on his face and made you feel good. I just came from his house, and his wife Mindy and his children are holding up really well. And they've said the same thing, that Donnie wouldn't want them walking around, feeling sorry for themselves. So it has been a pretty huge shock, when we first heard it yesterday. You were kind of like, you couldn't believe it, really. I'd just seen him Tuesday. I'd go over and swim once in a while, and we'd talk for quite a while. And he was getting ready probably to retire in a couple of years. He was trying to get his captain's license. He loved fishing. He took every opportunity he could to go fishing. So when I heard it yesterday, it was pretty much disbelief.
How would he want us to go about right now?
Probably just remembering him and making sure that, and I know Jeremy will do this, making sure that the Gator family kind of takes care of his family, and include them on anything that we do, and then just kind of continue on. And I know we'll hope Coach Troy, and I'm sure Coach Troy will hire somebody to continue on the tradition and keep working with the kids that he's got here now and the ones he had getting ready to come in.
And how are the student athletes doing? Has there been like a gathering for them? Have there been any group?
Yeah, Mr. Foley called a meeting at 3:30 yesterday of everybody. In this day and age of social media, of course by then everybody knew what had happened. And he had a couple of grief counselors with him, and they talked to the kids. And for the most part, I think the kids are in pretty big shock, especially the divers. But I think they're handling it well. And I was over there this morning, and it's just, it's not a happy atmosphere. Everyone's pretty sad, but everyone knows that we just have to continue on. There's nothing that we can do about it now, and that's what Donnie would want us to do.
He is still part of the Gator Nation. Have you been getting a lot of support from
Oh yeah,
the world?
yeah, everywhere. When I was over there at Donnie's house, Mindy was commenting on how her phone basically is just kind of blown up, and all the support, especially from the diving and swimming community, but everybody that Donnie's touched, and all the kids that he's coached. Because he was, as good a coach as he was an even better person. He was just a good person to be around. He cared about the kids. Didn't matter whether you were an NCAA champion or a walk-on or what, he treated you the same way.
Kind of the impact that he had throughout the whole swimming community, you could see it with people, wishing their well wishes to him and his family. Just what was his impact from your perspective on just kind of the whole swimming and diving community?
Well, I had a chance to be I was on the swim committee, and I was actually the chair for a number of years. So I would interact with everybody when we go to the NCAA meet. And he was one of those guys you never met anyone that had a bad word to say about Donnie. And then when Donnie would speak out at, like, for instance, coaches meeting on issues and stuff, everybody listened. He was kind of a voice of reason. Diving coaches and swimming coaches don't always get along, but yet Donnie got along with everybody. And I know from my interaction with him as a diving coach that he was just great to work with. There are programs where the diving and swimming coaches don't talk to each other, as crazy as that sounds. But Donnie was one of those guys that you could talk to, and if he told you a kid was a good diver and worth a certain amount of a scholarship, then you could kind of take it to the bank that that's what it was.
How will you remember him?
Wow. Just a great guy, just a really good guy.
He had a special relationship with his student athletes. I go through the pool numerous times, and he always had a good, positive environment, and that's kind of what those student athletes, if they want to go into coaching may kind of
Yeah.
live on his legacy.
Right, and not only the divers, but the swimmers. I mean, there are a lot of diving coaches that, you know, you go to a meet and they're concerned about the divers, and when the diving's over, they leave and they only stay at that one part of the pool, the diving well. Maybe, you know, Donnie was there on the pool deck. He knew who was swimming. He knew what the kids swam, you know, and you know, I know when I talked to Coach Troy last night, he's out of the meet, and he said, you know, like a swimmer like Elizabeth Beisel was just devastated hearing that, you know.
I heard you mention before that his family is, you know, instead of doing a funeral service, they more want to have a party after everything kind of settles down. Do you
Yeah.
think that kind of is a representation of his personality?
Exactly. Yeah, I don't think Donnie would want a whole bunch of people, you know, sitting in a funeral home or a church, you know, feeling bad. I think he'd want everybody to be outside, you know, probably having a beer and telling stories about Donnie. So,
And how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. It's just kind of hard, you know. It's such a shock, really. I mean, you know, you're not prepared for anything like that. You know, I mean, Donnie probably went fishing 3 or 4 days out of the week, mostly at Cedar Key. And so when I heard it yesterday, you know, my first reaction was, how could you be in a boating accident at Cedar Key? You know, you can only go about 2 miles an hour. And then I found out he was down at Fort Myers. You know, it changed things.
Did he have buddies with him?
Yeah, he had David West, who's a chiropractor here in town and was a diver for Donnie in the early 90s, really good diver. And David he does a lot of work for us at the athletic department down in the Limeron Training Center on our athletes. And so he and Donnie have been great friends ever since he graduated. And so he was with him, he was in the boat with him. And we don't really know a whole lot of the details about exactly what happened, but evidently they took David to the hospital, but they released him and he's on his way back now.